Emily sat by the window, her fingers wrapped around a warm cup of tea, watching the rain trace patterns across the glass. The world outside seemed alive, rushing and moving, while inside she felt suspended in a quiet emptiness. Her life with Daniel had always looked perfect. From the outside, friends would say they were a picture of happiness. But inside, Emily felt a subtle loneliness that no amount of laughter or conversation could fill. It wasn't that Daniel didn't care. He did, in his way. But life had a way of building walls between them. Work, responsibilities, and unspoken worries had slowly replaced the playful intimacy they once shared. Emily missed the days when a simple glance or a shared joke could make her heart flutter. She longed for the feeling of being truly seen, truly understood. She often thought about the small dreams she had tucked away, like opening her own art studio, painting not just on canvas but on the walls of people's hearts. She had been saving every spare dollar, imagining the day she could finally step into a world that was hers alone. But those dreams felt distant, almost fragile, overshadowed by the weight of compromise and daily routine. As the rain fell, Emily let her mind wander to the first time she and Daniel met. It had been at a quiet coffee shop on a rainy afternoon, just like this one. They had both reached for the same book on the shelf, her fingers brushing his. He had smiled, that warm, easy smile, and said, "Looks like we have the same taste in stories." That small moment had led to countless memories. Laughter echoing through shared apartments, whispered promises before sleep, and dreams built hand in hand. Yet, over time, those memories had begun to feel like echoes of someone else's life. Daniel had grown distant, and Emily often found herself speaking into the quiet of their home, wondering if he heard the unspoken words behind her voice. She loved him deeply, but love sometimes felt like a fragile thread stretched too thin. One evening, after another day that had passed like a blur, Emily noticed a change in Daniel. He seemed distracted, a shadow crossing his eyes whenever he thought she wasn't looking. She wanted to ask him what was wrong, to reach across the silence that had grown between them, but she hesitated. She had learned over the years that some things were easier to face when they came fully into the light. And yet, the fear of the unknown made her pause. That night, Emily sat alone at the dinner table, the rain tapping softly against the windows. She wondered if love always came with this quiet ache, this longing for connection that sometimes felt just out of reach. She thought about the life they had built together and the unspoken truths that now hovered like fragile glass above their heads, threatening to shatter at any moment. Despite the uncertainty, a small spark of hope remained in her chest. She believed that people could change, that hearts could reconnect, and that love could find its way back even through the hardest moments. But the question lingered: what would happen if the walls they had built around themselves grew too high to climb? As Emily poured another cup of tea and listened to the rain, she sensed that something in their world was about to shift. Something that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and herself. The quiet tension in the air whispered that nothing could stay the same forever, and Emily knew deep down that her life was on the brink of a moment that could either break her or transform her entirely. And so, in the stillness of that rainy evening, Emily waited, not knowing what was coming, but feeling with every fiber of her being that the choices ahead would change her forever. Emily walked slowly through their apartment, her fingers brushing over familiar objects, the framed photograph of their first trip together, a small vase Daniel had given her on their second anniversary, the well-worn couch where they had spent countless quiet evenings. Each item held a memory, a fragment of a life they had built together, and each one reminded her of the bond that had once felt unbreakable. She remembered the early days of their relationship, when everything had felt new and full of possibility. Daniel had a way of noticing the smallest details, like the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, or the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her dreams. Emily had felt seen in a way she had never known before, as if someone finally understood her heart without needing words. They had spent countless hours laughing over coffee in tiny cafes, wandering through quiet parks on Sunday mornings, and sharing long, meandering conversations about everything and nothing. It was in those moments that Emily had fallen not just in love with Daniel, but in love with the sense of being truly understood. She remembered the evenings when they would sit under the soft glow of the kitchen light, sharing stories of their childhoods, their fears, and their secret hopes. Those moments had felt timeless, suspended in a world that belonged only to them. But as the years passed, the world had demanded more from them: jobs, responsibilities, and obligations that gradually pulled them in different directions. Emily had noticed it slowly at first. The way Daniel's attention wandered. The way the pauses in their conversations grew longer. He had always been there physically, but sometimes it felt like the person she had once known was becoming a stranger. Despite the growing distance, there were still moments that reminded her of the connection they had shared. She recalled the day Daniel had surprised her with a trip to the little lake she had loved as a child. He had packed her favorite snacks, brought a blanket, and simply sat with her as they watched the sunset. Emily remembered how safe and cherished she had felt. The warmth of his hand in hers. The quiet understanding between them that didn't require words. There were also small, almost invisible gestures that kept the love alive. Daniel leaving her favorite flowers on the kitchen counter, sending a thoughtful message in the middle of a busy day, remembering to play the song she had hummed that morning. Those little things had been their lifeline. Reminders that the love they had built wasn't entirely lost. And yet, Emily knew that love alone could not bridge the gap that had grown between them. The walls they had built, partly from fear, partly from miscommunication, kept them apart. She had tried to reach him through conversation, through patience, through quiet gestures of care. But sometimes it felt like her words dissolved before they reached him. Still, even with the distance and the unspoken disappointments, she could not forget the feeling of belonging she had once known in his presence. That memory, soft and glowing, had kept her from giving up entirely. It reminded her that people were capable of change, that hearts could reconnect if they tried, and that love was worth the effort even when it was difficult. As Emily looked around their apartment that evening, she allowed herself to sink into the nostalgia. She remembered the laughter, the quiet nights, the small victories they had celebrated together. She remembered the love that had felt infinite, the way it had made ordinary moments extraordinary. And though the present felt heavy with silence and uncertainty, those memories whispered a quiet promise that perhaps, with patience and honesty, they could find their way back to one another. The rain tapped gently against the window again, echoing the rhythm of her heart. Emily knew that their story was far from over. The past, with all its warmth and tenderness, still had the power to guide them toward a future filled with hope if only they could reach for it together. The morning sunlight spilled gently across the kitchen, catching the dust particles in the air and painting everything with a soft glow. Emily was pouring herself a cup of tea when she heard the soft creak of the front door. Daniel had returned from his early shift, carrying the weight of long hours and unspoken thoughts in the slump of his shoulders. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, no words, no explanations, just the quiet acknowledgement of their shared history. Emily felt a flutter in her chest, a mix of nostalgia and longing. The memories of their laughter, the small moments of care, and the tender understanding they had once shared came rushing back, unbidden yet powerful. Daniel set down his bag and paused, as if sensing the weight of the silence. Then he spoke softly, his voice hesitant but sincere. "I found something today, something that reminded me of us." He held out a small envelope, worn at the edges. Emily took it carefully and opened it, revealing a collection of handwritten notes they had exchanged early in their relationship, little reminders of dreams, promises, and the joy they had once shared. Each note was a snapshot of a life filled with hope, laughter, and the kind of love that made ordinary days feel extraordinary. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, of remembering a connection that had never truly disappeared. She read one note aloud, her voice trembling slightly. "No matter how far apart we get, I will always see you. I will always believe in us." Daniel's eyes softened. I forgot how much I needed to see us, Emily. I've been so caught up in everything else, I didn't realize I was losing sight of what mattered most." The words hung in the air, simple but profound. In that moment, Emily felt a bridge forming again between them, a fragile, trembling bridge, but one that offered a chance for reconciliation. She realized that love, even when tested by silence or mistakes, could still find its way back through sincerity, understanding, and small acts of care. They spent the morning together, talking not about blame or regret, but about their dreams, their fears, and the simple joys they had almost forgotten. Daniel listened in a way he hadn't for months, asking questions, sharing reflections, and showing Emily that he wanted to understand her again. Emily, in turn, allowed herself to speak her heart without fear of judgment, trusting that he was ready to hear her truth. Later, they walked through the nearby park, the city alive with the sounds of children playing and birds calling from the trees. Each step felt lighter than the last, as if the world had shifted slightly to make room for hope. They laughed at shared memories, pointed out familiar landmarks, and quietly marveled at how easily the past could resurface in the present. Emily realized that it wasn't one grand gesture that had reignited her feelings. It was a series of small, intentional moments. The notes, the open conversation, the recognition that they still cared deeply for each other. Love, she thought, was not always about fireworks or dramatic declarations. Sometimes it was about noticing the other person, showing up and choosing each day to reconnect. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold, Emily and Daniel returned home, hand in hand. There was still work to be done, trust to rebuild, habits to change, but for the first time in months, the future felt possible. Emily looked at Daniel and smiled softly. The quiet understanding between them spoke volumes. Their love had been tested, but it was not broken. In the midst of life's unpredictability, they had found each other again, not through grand gestures, but through honesty, patience, and the gentle power of shared memories. And as the evening settled around them, Emily knew one thing with clarity. Love could be reignited. Hearts could be mended, and even in the shadow of past mistakes, hope could bloom again.